words. The night was dark, and the wind howled through the towering trees that lined the road leading up to Chief Abadil's grand estate. The storm had come suddenly, unexpected and relentless, casting an eerie glow over the village as flashes of lightning illuminated the sky. The people of the land feared nights like this, when the heavens roared and the rain poured like the tears of the gods. At the heart of this powerful storm, a man of unparalleled influence was making his way home. Chief Abadil was a name spoken with both reverence and fear. He was not just wealthy, he was the wealthiest man in the region, a titan of business, a ruler of lands, and a man whose mere presence commanded respect. His sprawling mansion, sitting atop the highest hill in the village, was a symbol of his immense power. From his windows, he could look down upon the very people whose lives were shaped by his decisions. But despite his riches, despite the way the world bent to his will, something gnawed at the core of his existence. There was a hollowness within him, a void that neither wealth nor power could fill. He had no wife to share his victories with, no children to carry on his legacy. Though he surrounded himself with advisors, guards, and servants, his nights were often spent in silence. His vast mansion, though grand, was cold and empty, a castle without a queen. As the chief's convoy made its way through the storm, the rain lashed against the sleek, black cars in his fleet. The headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the winding road ahead. But then, something unusual caught his eye. There, sitting by the roadside, was a figure. At first, she was barely visible in the torrential downpour, a mere shadow against the backdrop of the storm. But as the cars drew closer, Chief Abadil could make out the form of a girl, young, fragile, and completely drenched. She sat with her arms wrapped around her knees, shivering violently. Her long, tangled hair clung to her face, and her tattered clothes were soaked through. The convoy slowed down. Chief Abadil furrowed his brows, his mind racing with questions. Who was this girl? Where had she come from? The village was miles behind them, and there were no homes nearby. The thought of a lone child sitting on this deserted stretch of road, braving a storm like this, sent a strange shiver down his spine. For a moment, he considered driving past. This was not his concern. He was a man who made calculated decisions, not one who allowed sentiment to cloud his judgment. And yet, something, perhaps fate, perhaps something more, made him hesitate. A voice within him, deep and insistent, urged him to stop. With a silent nod, he signaled his driver to pull over. The wheels splashed against the wet ground as the car came to a halt. The storm raged on, but for Chief Abadil, this night had already taken a turn he could not yet understand. As Chief Abadil stepped out of his car, the cold wind bit through his fine silk robes. The rain continued its merciless assault, drenching his polished shoes as he approached the frail figure sitting on the roadside. His guards hesitated, unsure whether to follow. This was unlike their master. He was not a man known for acts of kindness. The girl barely reacted as he came closer. She shivered violently, her tiny frame curled into itself in an attempt to fight off the cold. Her dark, matted hair clung to her face, her eyes cast downward. The chief crouched in front of her, his towering presence dwarfing her fragile form. "What is your name?" he asked, his deep voice cutting through the storm. No answer. "Where's your family?" Again, silence. She parted her lips slightly as if to speak, but no sound came out. Her lips were cracked, her face gaunt with hunger. He noticed how thin she was, too thin. This girl had not eaten in days. His brows furrowed. There was something unusual about her presence. Her eyes, when she finally lifted them to meet his gaze, were unlike anything he had ever seen. Dark, endless pools of mystery, reflecting more than just her suffering. There was an eerie depth in them, a hypnotic pull that sent a strange chill through him. For a brief moment, he felt something unsettling in his chest, a sensation he could not explain. But then he shook it off. She was just a starving, homeless girl, terrified and lost. That was all. He rose to his full height and turned to his driver. "Bring her into the car," he commanded. The guards exchanged uneasy glances, but no one dared question the chief. One of them stepped forward, hesitated for just a second, then lifted the girl gently. She barely reacted, her body limp from exhaustion. As the convoy resumed its journey toward the mansion, the storm outside raged on. The next morning, the village was buzzing with whispers. "Did you hear? The chief brought home a girl last night." "A girl? Who is she?" "No one knows. She appeared from nowhere. Maybe she's a runaway. Or maybe something worse." The villagers, though loyal to Chief Abadil, were deeply superstitious. They believed in spirits, curses, and omens. The idea of a powerful man taking in a nameless, homeless girl unsettled them. It was unnatural. Inside the grand estate, the girl sat on the edge of a plush bed, staring at the lavish room around her. She had been bathed, clothed, and fed. The oversized robe draped loosely over her small frame, the warmth of it unfamiliar but comforting. Chief Abadil's servants moved around her with quiet caution, their eyes darting toward her when they thought she wasn't looking. They whispered among themselves, exchanging uneasy glances. "This is a bad idea," one of the maids murmured. "She could be a thief," another muttered. "Or something worse." Yet, despite their unease, none dared voice their concerns to the chief. When he finally entered the room, everyone fell silent. His presence was commanding, his sharp eyes scanning the girl with unreadable intent. "I will call you Amina," he said simply. The girl did not react. She only watched him, her expression unreadable. The chief dismissed the servants with a wave of his hand. Once they were gone, he sat across from her, his gaze steady. "Can you speak?" he asked again. Amina's lips parted slightly, but only a whisper of a sound came out. She lowered her gaze as if ashamed. He sighed. "You don't have to say anything now. But you are safe here. You will be fed, clothed, and protected." Still, she remained silent. As the days passed, Amina settled into the mansion, yet she remained an enigma. She spoke very little, but her eyes were always watching, absorbing every detail of her surroundings, every movement of the servants, every gesture of the chief. She moved with an eerie grace, her steps almost soundless. Despite her frailty, there was something unsettling about her presence. The chief's dogs, fierce beasts that had guarded the mansion for years, whimpered when she came near. The birds outside her window would fall silent when she stepped onto the balcony. The servants grew increasingly uneasy. "There is something wrong with that girl," the head maid whispered to the others. "I can feel it." "She isn't normal," another agreed. "The way she looks at things, it's like she isn't human." But Chief Abadil ignored their warnings. "Enough," he snapped one evening when his most trusted servant voiced his concerns. "She is just a girl. A poor, homeless girl. That is all." Yet deep in his heart, he knew that was not true. From the moment Amina stepped into the grand mansion, an unsettling aura seemed to follow her. The vast estate, once a place of structure and certainty, began to feel different, charged with an unseen force that no one could quite explain. The first signs were subtle. Late at night, the chief's servants would hear faint, eerie noises slithering through the halls, hissing sounds that seemed to come from nowhere. The first time it happened, the head maid dismissed it as a trick of the wind, but as the nights passed, the sounds grew louder, more distinct. It was as if something unseen was moving through the shadows, whispering its presence in a language only the dark could understand. At first, no one dared speak of it. The servants in the mansion feared angering the chief, knowing he would not tolerate superstition. But whispers spread among them, fear taking root in their hearts. "I hear it every night," one of the cooks confided to a maid. "Like something slithering beneath the floorboards." "It's just your imagination," the maid tried to reason, though her voice shook slightly. But then, the chief himself began experiencing strange occurrences. One night, he awoke drenched in sweat, his breathing labored. His dreams had been vivid, unlike anything he had ever experienced before. Serpents. Dozens of them, their slick bodies coiling around his bed, their glowing eyes watching him. He had felt them slithering over his chest, their forked tongues flicking at his skin. Their hissing had filled his ears, growing louder and louder until he awoke with a start, his heart pounding. He sat up, rubbing his temples, trying to shake off the lingering dread. It was just a dream, he told himself. Nothing more. But the dream returned the next night. And the next. Each time, the visions grew more intense. The serpents no longer simply watched him, they moved closer, their scales brushing against his skin, tightening around him, as if waiting for something. Meanwhile, something more tangible disturbed the village. Livestock began disappearing. First, it was a single goat, then a few chickens. The villagers searched frantically, but the animals were gone without a trace until their remains were found in the outskirts of the village. Their bodies were mutilated, covered in strange, unrecognizable bite marks. Some said the wounds looked as if they had been made by an enormous snake, but no snake that size had ever been seen in the region. Fear spread among the people. "Something unnatural is happening," the village elder murmured, shaking his head. "This is no ordinary beast." Some villagers blamed wild animals. Others whispered of curses, dark spirits that roamed the night. But one name kept surfacing in hushed conversations. Amina. Ever since she arrived, things had changed. Strange things. Unexplainable things. The villagers tried to warn the chief. "She is not normal," the elder told him one afternoon. "We have seen things like this before, spirits that take the form of humans, hiding in plain sight." Chief Abadil scoffed. "You believe in fairy tales, old man." The elder held his gaze. "Do you not hear the hissing at night? Do you not see what is happening around you?" The chief remained silent for a moment. The dreams, the strange noises, the unease in his home, it all lingered at the back of his mind. And yet, when he thought of Amina, he saw nothing but a fragile, lonely girl. A child with no home, no past. She was quiet, observant, and obedient. Never once had she given him a reason to fear her. "I took her in. She is under my protection," he said firmly. "Whatever is happening in the village has nothing to do with her." The elder sighed but said no more. Despite the warnings, the chief found himself growing fond of Amina. Her presence, though mysterious, had become familiar, even comforting. She still spoke very little, but when she did, her voice was soft, almost musical. She was unlike anyone he had ever met, and despite the tension surrounding her, he could not bring himself to turn her away. Perhaps the villagers were simply afraid of what they did not understand. Perhaps, just perhaps, he was right to trust her. But trust, as he would soon learn, was a dangerous thing. As the days turned into weeks, Amina adapted to life in the mansion with remarkable ease. Despite arriving as a weak and frightened girl, she quickly proved to be far more observant and intelligent than anyone had expected. The servants, though still wary of her, couldn't deny that she was unlike any child they had seen before. She learned the rules of the house without being taught. She knew where everything was, even places she had never been. She moved through the mansion with a quiet grace, her presence almost ghostly, as if she belonged to the house long before she had ever set foot in it. Chief Abadil found himself watching her with growing fascination. It was not just her intelligence that intrigued him, but the way she carried herself, calm, composed, and almost regal, as if she had once been something greater than a homeless girl found in the rain. She rarely spoke unless necessary, yet when she did, her words were sharp, precise, and carried an eerie wisdom beyond her years. One evening, as the chief sat in his grand study reviewing business contracts, Amina entered silently and stood by the door. "You should not sign that," she said in a soft but firm voice. The chief frowned, glancing up from the parchment in his hands. "What are you talking about?" She pointed at the document. "The man you are dealing with is not to be trusted." Abadil raised an eyebrow. "And how would you know that?" Amina did not answer right away. She simply stared at him with those deep, knowing eyes, the same eyes that had unsettled him the night he found her in the rain. "You will regret it if you sign," she said, then turned and walked away, disappearing down the hall before he could question her further. The chief chuckled to himself, shaking his head. How could a girl with no past, no connections, and no knowledge of his business possibly know such things? He dismissed her words as nothing more than a child's imagination. Yet, something about the certainty in her voice lingered in his mind. Later that night, doubt gnawed at him. Against all logic, he hesitated before sealing the deal. Instead of signing, he chose to wait a few more days. The following morning, a messenger arrived in a hurry bearing urgent news. The man he was about to do business with, one of his wealthiest rivals, had been secretly plotting against him. The deal had been a trap. If he had signed, he would have lost millions and placed his entire empire at risk. A shiver ran down his spine. How had Amina known? Had it been a lucky guess? A coincidence? Or was there something else at play? For the first time in his life, the powerful chief, who had always trusted only himself, began to believe that fate had sent the girl to him for a reason. From that day forward, he listened more closely to Amina's words. She had an uncanny ability to sense danger before it struck. When storms were coming, she would say, "Prepare the house." Before anyone else even noticed the shift in the wind, the rains would pour. When a servant was about to fall ill, she would whisper, he should rest, and by morning, fever would take hold of the man. It was as if she could see what others could not. Amina became more than just a guest in his home. She became his silent advisor, a presence he found himself drawn to in a way he could not explain. The bond between them deepened, and for the first time in years, Chief Abadil no longer felt alone. But even as he grew closer to her, a small, lingering voice in the back of his mind whispered a warning. She is not what she seems. The air was heavy with the scent of burning incense as the village elder stepped into the grand halls of Chief Abadil's mansion. His frail frame was wrapped in a tattered cloak, his weathered hands clutching a carved wooden staff. Though his body was weak with age, his presence commanded respect. The servants, normally bustling about their duties, fell silent as he passed. They knew the elder did not make visits without reason. His words carried the weight of centuries, and his warnings were never to be ignored. Chief Abadil sat on his grand chair, dressed in his finest robes, a goblet of wine resting in his palm. He eyed the elder with mild curiosity. "Old man," the chief said, his voice laced with amusement. "What brings you to my home at this late hour?" The elder's eyes, dark and knowing, settled on him. "I come with a warning, my chief. You have taken in a girl who does not belong in this world." The chief smirked. "Amina? She is but a child, weak and homeless. What harm could she possibly bring?" The elder's grip on his staff tightened. "You do not understand," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "There is an old legend, passed down through generations. The legend of the snake spirit." The room grew colder, the flickering candle flames swaying as if caught in an unseen breeze. The servants shifted uneasily, whispering among themselves. "The snake spirit is a being of great power," the elder continued. "It is neither human nor beast, but something in between. It takes the form of a helpless soul, drawing in those who show it kindness. But do not be fooled, my chief. It is a hunter, a deceiver. It waits for the right moment to strike." The chief laughed, shaking his head. "You expect me to believe this nonsense? These are old wives' tales, meant to scare children." The elder's expression did not change. "Tell me, Chief Abadil, have you not noticed the strange happenings in your home? The whispers in the night? The shadows that move when no one is there? Have you not seen the fear in your servants' eyes?" The chief's laughter faded. He thought of the unsettling dreams, the strange occurrences, the feeling that he was constantly being watched. But he would not show weakness. "Enough," he said, waving his hand dismissively. "I will not throw an innocent girl into the streets over superstition." The elder sighed, lowering his head. "Then you have sealed your fate." As the old man turned to leave, a shadow flickered in the corner of the room. Unseen by all but the darkness itself, Amina stood hidden in the shadows. She had heard everything. A slow, knowing smirk played on her lips. Her golden eyes, usually so dull and unassuming, shimmered with an eerie glow for the briefest of moments before fading back into the darkness. The days passed, and Amina's presence in Chief Abadil's life grew stronger. She was no longer the quiet, frail girl he had rescued from the storm. She had blossomed into a striking young woman whose grace and mystery captivated him. Her every movement was fluid, almost hypnotic, and when she spoke, her voice carried a melody that sent shivers down his spine. At first, the chief dismissed his feelings as mere fascination. He had seen many beautiful women in his life, had been courted by princesses and noblewomen alike, yet none had held his attention the way Amina did. There was something about her, something that made him feel whole, as though a missing piece of his soul had been found. He found himself seeking her out, longing for her presence. At night, when the loneliness used to consume him, he now found comfort in knowing that Amina was somewhere within his home, that she belonged to him in some unspoken way. But as his feelings deepened, so did the unease in his household. The servants, once wary but silent, began to whisper in hushed voices. They spoke of the unnatural cold that followed Amina wherever she walked, of the strange way the shadows seemed to shift around her, as if alive. Some swore they saw her eyes glow in the darkness, just for a moment, before returning to normal. Most unnerving of all was the change in her demeanor. Amina, once shy and reserved, now carried herself with a quiet confidence. She never voiced her displeasure, but the servants noticed how she watched, how she glared, when women came near the chief. One of the younger maids, a bright-eyed girl named Saad, had caught the chief's attention with her cheerful demeanor. One afternoon, as she served him tea, she laughed at something he said, her delicate fingers brushing against his wrist for the briefest of moments. It was then that Amina spoke. "Chief," she said softly, her voice like silk wrapped in steel. "Do you find her amusing?" The room fell silent. The air grew thick, heavy. Sada's smile faltered, and she quickly lowered her gaze, stepping back as though she had done something wrong. The chief chuckled, trying to ease the tension. "She is just a girl, Amina. Nothing more." Amina said nothing, but her golden eyes lingered on the maid a moment too long. That night, Saad fell ill with a sudden fever. She tossed and turned in her bed, her body drenched in sweat. By morning, she was gone, her body cold and lifeless. The other servants whispered, but no one dared to speak their thoughts aloud. Despite the strange occurrences, Chief Abadil was blind to it all. His heart was set, he loved Amina, and he was ready to make her his wife. One evening, under the glow of the full moon, he called for a jeweler to craft a ring fit for a queen. The gold was pure, the gemstone rare, reflecting the deep hues of the night sky. As he prepared to propose, a violent wind howled through the mansion. Candles flickered wildly, casting twisted shadows against the walls. The windows rattled, and the air grew frigid. Then, the sound came, a deep, guttural hiss, slithering through the corridors like a living thing. The chief turned sharply, his heart pounding. The servants had long since retreated to their quarters, leaving the mansion eerily silent. And then, in the reflection of the grand mirror before him, he saw it. Amina stood behind him, her expression unreadable. But it was not her face that sent chills down his spine, it was her eyes. They glowed with an unnatural light, golden and reptilian, flickering like embers in the darkness. For the first time, fear gripped Chief Abadil's heart. Something was very, very wrong. The grand hall of the mansion was alive with celebration. Laughter rang through the air, and golden lanterns cast a warm glow over the polished floors. Tonight was special, a festival in the village, and Chief Abadil had spared no expense in ensuring his home reflected the joy outside. Amina stood beside him, regal and mesmerizing in a flowing crimson gown. Her golden eyes gleamed under the candlelight, her smile captivating. The chief could not take his eyes off her, utterly enchanted by her presence. Yet, beneath the surface, something felt off. The servants were uneasy, their movements stiff with fear. They avoided Amina's gaze, lowering their heads whenever she passed. The chief noticed but dismissed it, perhaps they were simply overwhelmed by the grandeur of the night. Among the servants, one young man, Ade, could no longer hold back his suspicions. He had seen too much, heard too many strange things. The unnatural cold that followed Amina, the eerie whispers in the wind, the way shadows seemed to twist unnaturally when she walked. And, most chilling of all, the sudden deaths that had begun to plague the household. Determined to uncover the truth, Ade made a decision: he would follow Amina that night. As the festivities raged on, Amina excused herself, slipping away from the crowd. Ade, keeping to the shadows, followed her. She walked with a strange grace, her steps eerily silent despite the gravel beneath her feet. She moved toward the forest behind the mansion, the moon casting a silver glow over the trees. Ade's pulse quickened. What was she doing out here? Hiding behind a large tree, he watched as Amina came to a stop in a small clearing. The night air was still, the only sound the rustling of leaves. Then, to his horror, she began to change. Her delicate fingers twisted, elongating into gleaming scales. Her skin shimmered unnaturally before peeling away, sloughing off like a discarded garment. Where Amina had once stood, a massive, glowing serpent now coiled, its golden eyes piercing through the darkness. Its body shimmered with an otherworldly glow, and its fangs glistened in the moonlight. Ade clamped a hand over his mouth, stifling a scream. His heart pounded violently in his chest. The village elder had been right. Amina was no ordinary girl, she was the legendary snake spirit. Panic surged through Ade as he stumbled backward, snapping a twig beneath his foot. The serpent's head whipped toward him, its glowing eyes locking onto his trembling form. He turned and ran. His feet pounded against the earth, breath coming in ragged gasps as he sprinted toward the mansion. He had to warn the chief. He had to tell someone, anyone. But he never made it. A chilling hiss echoed behind him, growing closer. He dared not look back. Suddenly, pain exploded through his body. A force struck him, sending him sprawling onto the cold ground. His vision blurred, the world spinning. Through the haze, he saw the massive serpent looming over him, its fangs dripping with venom. The last thing he heard was the whisper of scales slithering through the grass before darkness claimed him. By morning, Ade's lifeless body was found near the edge of the forest, his face frozen in a silent scream. The news spread through the mansion like wildfire. The servants were terrified, whispering that he had seen something he was never meant to see. But none dared to speak the truth aloud. When Chief Abadil heard of Ade's death, a deep unease settled over him. He had always dismissed the warnings, laughed off the superstitions of the elders. But now, something gnawed at him. That night, unable to shake his growing doubts, he sat alone in his chambers. The candle flickered beside him, casting shifting shadows on the walls. He turned, his gaze falling upon the grand mirror in the corner of the room. Then, his breath caught. Amina stood in the doorway, her figure outlined against the dim candlelight. But something was wrong, her shadow did not match her form. He squinted, his pulse quickening. The silhouette cast upon the wall was not that of a woman but of something else entirely. Something monstrous. A shape with a long, coiled body and piercing, reptilian eyes. His blood ran cold. Amina took a step forward, smiling softly. "My love," she whispered. But for the first time, Chief Abadil did not see the beautiful woman he had grown to adore. He saw the truth. The air in the grand chamber was heavy, thick with an unspoken tension. The flickering candlelight cast long, wavering shadows across the walls, distorting Amina's delicate features. But Chief Abadil no longer saw her as he once did. The beauty that had once entranced him now felt like an illusion, a veil covering something far more dangerous. His hands clenched into fists at his sides as he took a deep breath. He had always prided himself on being fearless, on standing his ground no matter the challenge. But now, for the first time in his life, he felt the gnawing grip of uncertainty. "Amina," he said, his voice calm but firm, "I need to know the truth. Who are you?" Amina tilted her head, her golden eyes gleaming under the candlelight. "You already know," she murmured, her voice like silk. The chief swallowed hard. "No," he insisted. "I want to hear it from you. The servants are afraid." The village elder warned me. And now, Ade is dead. His voice wavered at the last words. Tell me, what are you? Amina's lips curled into a small smile, one that sent a shiver down his spine. She stepped closer, moving with an unnatural grace. I have never lied to you, my love, she said softly. I never pretended to be anything I wasn't. His chest tightened. Then explain the shadow, he demanded. Explain what Ade saw before he couldn't bring himself to finish the sentence. Amina sighed, as if disappointed. She turned slightly, allowing the candlelight to shift against her form. And there it was again. The shadow that did not match. His breath caught. The silhouette stretched unnaturally across the wall, its sinuous, coiled shape unmistakable. It was the shape of a serpent. Abadil took a step back, his heart pounding. What are you? He whispered. Amina's expression did not change. I am Amina, she said simply. The same woman who has stood by your side. The same woman who warned you of betrayal, who kept you safe, who loved you when no one else did. Her words, so full of certainty, twisted something deep inside him. He had felt her love. He had trusted her. She had never once tried to harm him. And yet, you are not human, he finally said. Amina's golden eyes flashed. Does it matter? She asked gently. Silence fell between them. He should have known. From the moment he found her on that stormy night, there had always been something strange about her. The way she moved, the way she seemed to know things before they happened. He had dismissed the warning signs, choosing to believe in what he wanted rather than what was real. And now he stood before her, the truth undeniable. What do you want from me? He asked, his voice hoarse. Amina's expression softened. Only what I have always wanted, to be by your side. His mind raced. Could he accept this? Could he love something that was not of this world? And then, her expression darkened just slightly. But, she continued, if you choose to turn against me, if you let fear take hold, there will be consequences. The unspoken threat hung in the air, wrapping around him like invisible chains. Abadil stared at her, torn between fear and the love that still burned in his chest. What was he supposed to do? The night was thick with tension. Outside the grand mansion, torches flickered in the hands of the gathered villagers, their faces hardened with fear and determination. The elders stood at the front, their voices grave and unwavering. Chief Abadil, the eldest among them, spoke, his voice carrying across the courtyard. You must send her away. She is not one of us. She is a danger to you, to this land, to us all. The chief stood at the entrance of his mansion, his heart heavy with an unbearable weight. Behind him, Amina lingered in the doorway, silent and still. The same villagers who once revered him now watched him with suspicion. They had come not as his subjects, but as a force demanding action. Chief, another elder urged, she is a snake spirit, a deceiver. The heavens have sent us signs, dead livestock, vanishing servants, the strange occurrences. How much more proof do you need? Abadil turned slightly, his gaze flickering to Amina. Her golden eyes no longer held their usual warmth. Instead, they were clouded with sorrow. She had known this moment would come. Amina, he said, his voice quieter, almost pleading. Tell them you mean no harm. She did not answer. Instead, she stepped forward, her bare feet making no sound on the stone path. The crowd instinctively stepped back, clutching their charms and amulets. Some whispered prayers, others held their breath. You ask me to deny who I am, Amina finally spoke, her voice carrying a sadness so deep it sent chills through those who heard it. I never deceived you, my chief. I never harmed you. And yet, here we are. Abadil clenched his fists. He wanted to fight for her, to tell them all that she was more than the fear they carried. But the weight of his people, the lives he was sworn to protect, pressed against him. He took a deep breath. Amina, he said slowly, his words deliberate and final. You must leave. The silence that followed was deafening. Amina's golden eyes met his, and for the first time, he saw something he had never seen in them before. Not anger, not hatred, but heartbreak. You choose them, she whispered. Abadiel's throat tightened. I choose my people, he said, though the words burned him as he spoke them. Amina gave a small, sad smile. Then you have made your choice, my love. She stepped back, her expression unreadable. The wind howled through the trees as if mourning the moment alongside them. As she turned to leave, she paused, her voice carrying on the breeze. I will never forget this, Chief Abadiel. And with that, she was gone, vanishing into the darkness as though she had never been there at all. The villagers cheered, but Abadiel felt no victory, only an emptiness deeper than he had ever known. The night swallowed her as she disappeared into the dense forest, her figure vanishing between the towering trees. The villagers exhaled in relief, their collective tension easing as they watched her go. But Chief Abadiel felt no relief, only an aching hollowness in his chest. The woman he had loved was gone, and he had sent her away with his own words. Then, the world began to change. A low rumble echoed through the hills, the ground trembling beneath their feet. The torches in the villagers' hands flickered violently before being extinguished by a sudden, unnatural gust of wind. The stars above, once bright and clear, were swallowed by swirling black clouds, blotting out the moonlight. A heavy stillness settled over the land, thick with an unspoken warning. Then came the first hiss. It started as a whisper in the darkness, soft and insidious, like dry leaves rustling against stone. But within moments, it grew, rising into a chorus of slithering bodies, a sinister sound that sent icy fear into the hearts of all who heard it. The villagers turned, gasping in horror. The forest edge was no longer empty. A tide of movement rippled through the grass as thousands of snakes slithered forth, their eyes gleaming like embers in the darkness. They poured in from every direction, small ones, large ones, some as thick as a man's arm, others long enough to coil around trees. The villagers screamed, scrambling to flee, but there was nowhere to run. The serpents moved as one, a living flood, surrounding the mansion and the village beyond. Abadiel's guards sprang into action, drawing their swords, spears, and torches. Protect the chief, one of them roared. They slashed at the advancing creatures, but for every snake they struck down, 10 more slithered forward. The battle was futile. The mansion's walls, once symbols of safety and power, were soon covered with writhing bodies. Then, the storm began. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the horror unfolding below. Thunder roared, shaking the heavens with its fury. The wind howled through the trees, bending them as if they were nothing more than twigs. Rain poured down in heavy sheets, but the fire in Amina's heart burned brighter than the storm itself. And then, she returned. From the depths of the forest, a figure emerged. But it was not the woman Abadiel had loved. No longer the quiet, mysterious girl he had sheltered. No longer the fragile being he had once sought to protect. Before them stood a colossal serpent, its body gleaming with golden scales that shimmered even in the darkness. Its eyes, once soft, now blazing with fury, locked onto the chief. The ground quaked as she moved, her massive form undulating with an eerie grace. She rose, her enormous head towering above the terrified villagers. When she spoke, her voice was no longer the delicate whisper he had known. It was layered, ancient, powerful, echoing through the storm like the very voice of the gods. You chose them over me, Abadiel. The chief fell to his knees, his heart hammering against his ribs. Amina, please, he pleaded, his voice barely audible over the storm. I never wanted this. Her eyes flashed. Yet you cast me away. He swallowed hard. I was afraid. Afraid of me? Her voice was laced with sorrow, but beneath it was something far more dangerous. Betrayal turned into wrath. She turned her gaze to the village. The people trembled beneath her sight, paralyzed by the weight of her presence. She exhaled slowly, and a wave of heat rippled outward, the air thick with a strange energy. I gave you my love, she said, her voice breaking with pain. I asked for nothing in return but your trust. And yet, when they whispered fear into your ears, you turned against me. Abadiel shook his head. No, She let out a low hiss, silencing him. The storm roared in answer, the lightning now striking dangerously close. "You will know what it is to suffer," she declared, her golden scales gleaming like molten fire. "You will know what it is to be abandoned, to feel the weight of loneliness crushing your soul." The serpents around the mansion surged forward. Walls crumbled beneath their assault. The chief's guards, valiant as they were no match for the divine fury they faced. One by one, they fell, their cries swallowed by the storm. Abadil gasped as his own body betrayed him, his legs felt heavy, his vision blurred. He clutched his chest, a terrible realization dawning upon him. It was her doing. The poison was already in his veins, seeping into him like a slow-burning fire. Amina lowered her head, bringing her massive face mere inches from his own. "I will leave you with life, but not power. Not respect. Not love." The storm intensified as she slithered away, her form vanishing into the darkness. The great mansion, once the pride of the kingdom, stood in ruins. The villagers, those who survived, fled in terror. The once feared Chief Abadil, stripped of everything he had ever known, lay helpless on the rain-soaked ground. And as the storm finally began to ease, the last thing he heard was the fading echo of Amina's voice. "I will never forget." The mansion, once a symbol of power and dominance, now stood in ruins. Its grand walls, once lined with the finest tapestries and golden embellishments, were nothing but shattered remains, overrun with creeping vines and the eerie silence of abandonment. What had once been filled with life and laughter, or at least the illusion of it, was now desolate, left to decay under the weight of its tragic history. No one saw the chief after that night. The villagers whispered of his fate, their voices hushed with fear whenever they spoke of him. Some said the snake spirit had taken him, her wrath consuming him entirely, leaving behind nothing but dust and echoes of his past sins. Others believed he had fled into the wilderness, his mind shattered by betrayal and regret, forced to live as a man haunted by the choices he had made. But the most chilling tale of all was the one that sent shivers down the spines of those who dared speak it. They say he still roams the forest to this day. That on moonless nights, when the air is thick with mist and the trees sway as though whispering secrets to one another, his ghostly figure can be seen wandering among the shadows. Some claim to have heard his voice carried by the wind, a broken, sorrowful plea for forgiveness that will never come. The once mighty chief, a man who had everything yet understood nothing, was now nothing more than a lost soul, doomed to walk the earth without rest. His story became a legend, a cautionary tale passed down through generations. Parents warned their children never to trust beauty without knowing the soul beneath it. Elders spoke of the dangers of pride and blindness, of ignoring the wisdom of those who had come before. Most of all, they warned against kindness given to strangers on stormy nights. No villager, no matter how kind-hearted, dared open their doors when the rain poured and the wind howled through the trees. No matter how pitiful the figure that appeared at their doorstep, no matter how desperate the cries for help, they turned their backs, bolting their doors and shutting their windows. For they all knew the tale of the billionaire chief and the snake girl. And they knew, deep in their bones, that she had never truly left.